So let's get started. We're going to just pick on estrogen today because it's way too hard to go into all of the different ones. But just remember that there are many, many, many types of hormones that the body has, including vitamin D. Vitamin D is a hormone. It's not a vitamin. It's very interesting. And how these all interact together is like a 16-year biomedical, kind of course on all of that stuff. But we can break it down into the things that are very important to us in allied health. And so one of the things we'll just talk about is estrogen and kind of its effect on the body and what that really means and what we can, and a couple of things that we can think about and a couple of things that may help us kind of reframe or retick the way we do rehab with some of these people at these different age groups. And here may be some reasons why. So first of all, just a quick overview. We have three types of estrogen in the body, very simply, but we do. Estrone, estradiol, and estriol. You don't need to worry about estriol. That is the kind of hormone that is down here that's present in pregnancy. So we're not talking about pregnancy today, so we don't have to worry about estriol, but we are going to talk about estrone and estradiol. And estradiol is the big hormone. That's the one that's most common in females during the reproductive years. But we can also have too much of it. So that can also lead to acne, loss of sex drive, some different things that we'll talk about. And again, very high levels of estradiol in the system can increase the risk of uterine and breast cancer, as well as ovarian cysts and other types of problems as well. All right, so this is the main one that runs through our system during the reproductive years, from the onset of menstruation to the onset of menopause. In menopause, estrone is the main one that's there. It's a weaker form, and it can convert to other forms of estrogen as necessary. It's mainly produced in the adrenals and in the fat cells. So when we worry about people who have high levels of estrogen as they're entering perimenopausal and menopausal, one of the things they talk about is removing as many of these fat cells as possible so that we can decrease the amount of estrogen in the body, particularly under instances such as postmenopausal breast cancer that may be estrogen receptor positive. Okay, so what does the estrogen life cycle mean, and why do we care about this? Well, it's really important for two reasons, because we need to understand what happens to estrogen in the body. First of all, it's metabolized in the liver. It has two pathways. So the first pathway takes it to an intermediate form here, and that's the three pathways for use. So the liver breaks it down into these pathways that are called hydroestrones here, okay, hydroxyestrones. And so those are the ones that the body uses. There's actually three. The fourth one we're not going to talk about because it's not important to the talk today. Then the second thing is, after it gets used up, it goes back to the liver and it gets converted into water-soluble forms. It gets conjugated into these water-soluble forms, which is destined to be eliminated from the body. And the two main places that it gets eliminated from is the GI and the urinary, with this GI system being the most prominent. So the first thing that I will say, and I'll repeat it again, if your clients are constipated, they are not clearing their estrogen metabolites, and that can lead to inflammation in the body. So this is why we worry about constipation in MSK patients, especially ones that are chronic and maybe more persistent. If they've got high levels of inflammation in the body, it may be because the constipation is not allowing them to clear the water-soluble estrogen metabolites. So what does this look like? This is kind of a crazy graph. You don't really need to think too much about it, other than just know that estrogen, it all comes from cholesterol. I mean, cholesterol is the precursor for all of this, okay? And then what happens is this kind of system here, as it goes through about 1,500 steps, ends up converting to testosterone, which converts into the estradiol. It also converts to the things that makes the free testosterone that the body uses over here. This estradiol can either go and create estrone, which is where it's stored in the fat cells, or it can also come down and make the 16A hydroxyestrone or the 2-hydroxyestrone. And a 4, again, we're not going to talk about too much. It's very minor with our talk today. But this is the hydroxyone that we want. This is the one that's going to make the really good estradiol that's going to be very usable in the body. And the reason that I have this slide up here, and this is the one that is going to be more inflammatory. And it is the one that is very prolific and has been linked to a lot of the cancers that are estrogen receptor positive. Here's the most important thing to remember here. This A pathway is increased by adding cruciferous vegetables and flaxseed to your diet. And this pathway is decreased by adding cruciferous vegetables and flaxseed to the diet. So one very simple thing we can do to right the ship on hormone balance: eat cruciferous vegetables, chew them up, cook them, eat them. Very, very healthy for the system. Why do we worry about prolonged stress and hormone balance? The reason is that for prolonged stress, the system has to figure out how to make cortisol. Okay, so when we first enter into a stress relationship, there's epinephrine, norepinephrine, adrenaline, all of those things that we're kind of familiar with that hit with the flight and fight, like, oh my goodness, everybody act, we have to run and go do it. But that's not sustainable in the system. So eventually, if we keep having to deal with this response to stress that we've decided is important, we have to figure out how to make cortisol. And the reason that this is important is because the precursors that make cortisol come from progesterone. And progesterone is the other hormone that balances estrogen and has its purposes within the reproductive cycle of the female lifespan. So all of these arrows that I've drawn in here, I'll just kind of let you know this here. So we have stress, okay, comes in here, the HPA axis, the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis, and it tells different things, and it starts to say that we have to do some certain things. So it comes down here and it makes cortisol. It says, okay, everybody get off, grab the adrenals, do some stuff, have the stress response, but eventually what we have to do is we have to make cortisol. So it increases its work here and comes around here, and it comes in and it looks at, oh, here's our friend, Mr. Progesterone. We're going to take you and we're going to use you as a substrate over here to make cortisol, and therefore you're not going to be making the other stuff. And then we're going to end up with estrogen at a little bit of a higher level than progesterone because we have a steal going on here. When we make cortisol, what it does is now it comes in and inhibits the ovaries. It inhibits the hormones, the luteinizing and the follicular stimulating hormone. And then it also inhibits up here, higher at the hypothalamus. And we have this kind of vicious cycle that starts going now around and around and around and around. But the main thing to realize is that progesterone goes down. Estrogen is still there, but it's starting to come down too, just not as fast as progesterone. And then eventually it will come down because we're inhibiting at all of these different places where all of the sex hormones are made. And so prolonged stress over time can be a real problem for having a healthy balance of the hormones that we need in our reproductive years. Some of the things to think about here, I think this slide is very interesting. No way can we read all of these words here, but we can talk about this. This is high when we have too high of levels of estrogen, or when we have really low levels of estrogen. And this can happen in the area of puberty into menstruation. And it can also happen at any time during the reproductive system. And then again, as we start to move into low levels, that's what we consider menopause, right? Well, we have kind of a rocky start into menopause because we have high levels and low levels and high levels and low levels that happen. But the interesting thing about this is most of the time, high level estrogen and low level estrogen symptoms look alike. Okay? We've got, tender breasts. We have hot flashes at night. We have trouble sleeping. We have hot flashes or night sweats. We have different things that look alike as we look over here. Fatigue, mood swings, depression, feelings of depression, dry, loosening, thin skin, dry skin, acne, bloating, constipation, abdominal pain, So the question becomes like, well, how do we know that they're high estrogen or low estrogen? Well, we really don't know. We can kind of look a little bit if they're still having periods, if they're really having heavy bleeding and it's very irregular, along with a lot of these symptoms, we can kind of begin to think that this person is really kind of moved into an estrogen imbalance. It's too high. Or if we're kind of looking at where the periods are gone, but they're having all of these issues down here on this right side here, then we have to kind of think that this may be more like menopause, or if this is happening before menopause, then what's going on and why did the estrogen levels drop so much? But here's the take-home message. What does all of this look like? That whole laundry list that you saw on both sides looks like central sensitization and central sensitivity, right? I mean, we've got the GI issues, we've got urgency issues, we've got headaches, we've got fatigue, depression, anxiety, and sleep issues. On top of this, we've got fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, complex regional pain, myofascial syndromes, chronic mechanical back pain. This is a big one with estrogen, is multiple chemical sensitivities, pelvic pain syndromes. So all of these things that happen with the hormone imbalance in the background can be a driver to leading us towards more central sensitivity and central sensitization. And we know what we need to do here when we're doing that. We need to start thinking about what is it our client is saying to us and how important is it? And most of the time when people come in with back pain or knee pain or hip pain, we're really quick to say, you have tendonitis, you have tendinosis, you have back pain that's this, you have back pain that's that, you have a hip labral tear, you have a lip, so is tendonitis, you have this, you have that. But nobody's backing up and saying, tell me about what else is going on in your life. Tell me about everything else. What other symptoms are you having? How are you sleeping? All of those things that our questionnaires can give to us can really help us begin to understand what the inflammatory picture is behind the response and behind the maybe simple patellar tendonitis that isn't quite so simple, because these are the ones that don't get well when we do the regular physical therapy type of protocols on them.